Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bultan of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals, to state senators, to mayors, to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about.
Welcome to An Honorable Profession. I'm Debbie Cox Bultan, CEO of the New Deal, where we're proud to support some of the inspiring leaders you hear on this podcast. In this episode, I talked with Robert Garcia, the first Latino, first openly gay, and youngest ever mayor of Long Beach, California. Now serving in his second term, we talked about the mayor's nationally recognized efforts on his COVID response, his plan to rebuild his city post-COVID, climate change, and the role he and his city played in reuniting 1,500 migrant children with their families this summer. We also talked about his inspiring personal story as an immigrant himself, becoming the first in his family to go to college, his career as an educator, and eventually running for office and leading his city in a whole new direction. Mayor Garcia, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to a fellow Californian. It's a big week this week here. We're taping a few days after the recall election. I know that the governor and the president were with you the day before the recall in Long Beach, talking in part about the governor's COVID response, your COVID response. Tell me what you make of the recall vote and what you think people, maybe particularly outside California, should take away from it.
Yeah, I think first that the governor has done a great job with the pandemic. And I think what the recall was really about was a referendum on his work as governor as it relates to taking on COVID-19 and how people feel about the direction of the state. And I think overwhelmingly, as we see across the state, he won in a landslide. It was not anywhere near what some of the pollsters were predicting. Here, in Long Beach, it was 71% of voters voted no. That's pretty typical across LA County. And he did incredibly well in the Bay Area. So this was a good moment for the state. I think he focused, rightly so, on mask mandates, ensuring that schools are safe. And that's what he's been focused on over the last, year plus. And so voters rejected what was a very, I think, undermining way of trying to change the election results. And we're happy to have had the president here to kind of close out the campaign. It was great. It's always great to see Air Force One land in your airport. And had a chance to spend some time with him and the governor. And it was a lovely time. He spent the night in the city also, which is really great.
Oh, that's so great. Well, and clearly, you guys have been doing a great job on COVID in your city. First, I am so sorry you've been touched so personally by this. You lost your mother and your stepfather to COVID last year, and I'm just heartbroken for you. How are you feeling about that? And then secondly, in spite of that personal loss, you really have become a national model for how to combat COVID, from the beginning, whether it was the testing site, then it was the vaccine site. How are you feeling about where things are in Long Beach?
Yeah, obviously, losing family is really hard. I think we have to remember that people are losing family and friends every single day to the pandemic. We are all trying to support each other through a very difficult time. It's very hard on my family. And I also know at the same time, the kind of person, my parents were, and the kind of person my mom was, and she was a healthcare worker, an essential worker. And this is a really important moment. And she would want us all to get to work, take care of people, make sure people are healthy and safe. And that's, I think, what we're focused on. Part of, I think, what drives me is trying to have policies in place that protect people and that spare people kind of the tragedy that has happened to my family and to me, and that's happened to so many others across the country. And so, you kind of wake up every day and you just figure out how many lives can we save today? And that's what the vaccine's all about. The White House has called Long Beach a national model as it relates to vaccine and testing, and the governor has done the same thing. And that's because we focus on equity. We focus on making sure that everything was accessible. We have generally outpaced most of our neighbors in the state, and we were the first city in California to educate teachers and get schools reopened in a way that was supportive and that was safe. And the teachers would want to come back to the classroom. They were double vaccinated before we opened up a single classroom door. So those are the types of actions that we took early on. I'm really proud of the city. There's still a lot of work to do. The pandemic is far from over. There's no victory laps that should be taken. We have a lot of work to do still, but I am proud of the progress so far.
Yeah. And anything else that we are, looking at schools reopening across the country now, and you were one of the biggest school districts in California. How's it going for your schools now that they're reopened in September?
So Long Beach Unified was not just the first school that put in place the vaccinations for teachers and employees, but also was the very first school to put in a mandate for a school district where all employees had to be vaccinated or do the weekly testing. So Long Beach went first, and then soon after Long Beach, the state put in a very similar, I think it was 2 days later, the state put in a statewide mandate. So I think the school system is doing well, and we do obviously on-site testing of all the kids. It's difficult that kids can't get vaccinated, or not all kids, of course, under 12. And so that does make it harder to contain spreads or outbreaks. I think what I told everyone is there are going to be outbreaks in schools. There are going to be moments where kids catch COVID because they are around each other, and it's hard to always keep kids separated and with their masks on. So it's just how do we prevent as much transmission as possible? How do we do testing, education, make sure parents at home are vaccinated? All of those are kind of pieces to it. But I think we're all under the same agreement that schools need to be open. It's not okay anymore to have kids. It's been very, very damaging to them, as it has been to everyone. But we're going to keep schools open as best we can and keep them safe.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that as a mother of two high schoolers who I know are so much better being in school than last year. So thanks for all your work on that. You're in your second term as mayor, and during your tenure, you've been incredibly active on all kinds of fronts, frankly. You've done such great work on economic development and climate and housing and education. I'm curious, so the pandemic has exposed so many gaps to access to services, so many longstanding inequalities that we knew were there pre-COVID, but I think they've just really shown a spotlight on those. And you have put together and passed earlier this year a plan using federal funding from the American Rescue Plan, but also federal and state and local dollars, a really comprehensive plan that I believe is your hope is to really be transformational with some of the things you're doing there. Talk to us about that, what you're prioritizing, how you're thinking about kind of building back better, to use the president's term.
Yeah, we actually were the first large American city to actually pass and adopt a plan off of the American Rescue Plan. Ours is called the Long Beach Recovery Act. It is about a $250 million plan that addresses three areas. One is economic recovery. The second is healthy and safe communities. And then the third is securing the city's financial future. It's been just a real godsend to have had President Biden and the Congress pass this plan. I mean, cities needed it desperately. And so, on the economic dollars, we're putting tens of millions of dollars, of course, into small businesses and economic empowerment zones, and the digital divide, making sure small businesses have touchless technology for payments, and making sure that there's youth employment in place for kids that need access to programs after school and workforce training and development. On the healthy and safe side, we know that gun purchases, for example, are up by like 65%, 70% across the country. In Long Beach, we've confiscated about 60% more guns just in the last year than the year prior. We know that gun sales have skyrocketed during the pandemic. And so for us, it's also about violence prevention, putting in programs in our parks, making sure that kids have resources, that families have childcare, making sure that we really retain a healthy community. And on the last piece of it, which was on the financial piece, we also use some of the resources to end furloughs so we can get 100% of our employees back to work. Cities took a huge hit when revenues dramatically decreased because of sales tax and other construction and stopping, and restaurants and other locations being closed. So we put resources into ending furloughs so we can get back to cleaning streets and having a full-fledged city force, and also helped us put our reserves back. We spent down about $50 million of emergency reserves during this last year because of the pandemic. And we have to be prepared for the next emergency or pandemic. So just to be able to replace our emergency reserves is also a very big help.
Yeah, it's a really impressive plan, and it's exciting. And I know that some of the stuff that we're talking about nationally, particularly we're obviously all eyes are on Congress right now around the bipartisan infrastructure deal. That's infrastructure is a place that you really prioritized early in your career as mayor. You've done a number of initiatives that you've proposed and passed in your city, but I think your signature one is this Measure A, putting in place a sales tax to be able to invest in infrastructure and public safety, and that I believe has now been extended and made permanent because it's going so well. So, A, how's that going? Why was that such a priority? And have any of the priorities changed in the light of COVID that you're now thinking about going forward?
Yeah, when I got elected mayor, the first thing I noticed was that the city had not passed a tax in 40 years, had not increased any type of tax, really. In fact, it had cut its sales tax, and that the last 3 attempts had all resulted in failed sales tax increase measures. So, a lot of folks early on were like, well, this is very unpopular. Don't propose raising taxes on the population. And then you've got a campaign to get people to raise their own taxes at the ballot. Most cities don't have the ability to just raise sales tax. It's got to go to voters. In California, that's the case. But I knew that there was so much need. And so we put in front of voters really with an infrastructure public safety measure, but mostly infrastructure to rebuild roads and streets across the city. And it passed. I want to say the final number was something close to 63, 64% of the population. We need 50% plus one to pass. And we're ecstatic. We're right now doing more streets and roads than we have in a generation. So we have more construction happening. We've had construction happening since the passage of Measure A. Voters made it permanent. And you can see the difference in just the streets everywhere. Now, it doesn't mean we still have $1 billion of streets to do, and so there's still a lot more resources needed. But just what it's been able to do for us has been pretty significant. So we're proud of that. I have worked to, believe it or not, I've proposed 10 different ballot measures since I've been mayor. All 10 have passed. So not one that we proposed has failed.
That's amazing.
Which is nice.
And what do you attribute that to? And in particular, the sales taxes you mentioned. I mean, that's a hard one to get through. People don't like to raise their own taxes. What do you attribute that success to?
I think good government, people trusting their government, I think is really important. I think if the people don't trust their government or don't like the folks over at City Hall, it's going to be harder to give them more resources of their resources, hard-earned resources. We have passed 1% sales tax increase. We've extended it, made it permanent. A second measure, we passed a measure to get more resources from water measure. We also got more resources. We put a cannabis tax on the ballot. All of these have been successful and passed. And then we've also passed some rainy day reserve fund measures, and then some significant charter reform. We extended term limits. People said no one's going to extend your term limit. So we went from 2 4-year terms for mayor and council members to 3 4-year terms. I mean, voters adopted these in the 60 percentile. We reformed auditing, and then we put it into independent redistricting commission for the city that passed, and an ethics commission for the city that also passed. So I'm really proud of all the kind of good government reforms we put in place, and people continue to trust the city, with these reforms and with the resources. So we're very, very grateful.
That's amazing. It's a lot of good models there. I know one thing you've been experimenting with I wanted to ask you about was the universal basic income or guaranteed income. Some really forward-thinking mayors around the country have been looking at this. What does your pilot look like, and how's it going so far?
So our pilot is going to be 500 single moms, and it is going to be in one zip code in the city. So it's concentrated into our zip code that has the most poverty. We think that with the 500 single moms that are living at or below the poverty line, if we did 500, it's about 35% of all eligible single mom women that would be in that category. So it's pretty significant. And they're not only going to receive the monthly support, but they're going to get the $500 direct cash, and then they're also going to get free childcare. They're going to get access to free Wi-Fi broadband. They're also going to get free public transportation. So we're creating like a package, basic income and some support. And then, of course, we have the University of Cal State Long Beach, which is doing the study and going to kind of study it for the whole year. So we think that the plan has already been adopted. The kind of application, kind of recruitment program process will start this fall. And we hope to launch it at the start of the year for the full year.
That's so exciting. I mean, we're really going to be watching closely on that one and see I think it's, I think we can all agree that, the income disparity, the lack of resources, the lack of access to these things, is just something that's not surmountable by, kind of around the margins. We have to do something really fundamentally different. So it'll be really exciting to see what kind of results you get. And we'll be watching very closely to see if that's something that can be scaled up.
Yeah, we're excited. We think it's the future. I mean, the truth is that the nature of work is changing so much. So it's good to I think experiment with these different types of economic programs.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting, not to belabor, but it's interesting how different cities are approaching it differently, right? Who they're targeting, whether or not they're doing wraparound services like you are. I mean, I think it's really, this experimentation is exciting. And I do want to just ask you about one other policy thing, because I just found it so cool when I was doing some research for this, which is you recently announced the completion of the Long Beach container terminal. People might not know that Long Beach is the second busiest container seaport in the U.S. You do a bunch of a huge percentage of shipping. So, and this is the world's first all-electric zero-emission mega terminal. So, what does that mean? And it feels like, from my cursory reading, that this is something that could really be a model around the world.
Yeah, we're very grateful. I mean, the Port of Long Beach is a leader in sustainability, and we're really focused on our climate action plan across the city, but also at the port. The port is a part of the city. This terminal is pretty incredible, just the amount of creativity and innovation that's gone into making it so sustainable. I mean, just everything that you see, from the vehicles to the lifts, the electric power is wonderful. The other thing I think is really great about this terminal and why it's been a partnership is the dock workers were very involved in kind of the development of early on about where the jobs would be, because I think what's important is as we look at our needs around climate and in rebuilding terminals and really just industry, we have to remember that some of the best paying union jobs are at these locations. I mean, the dock workers make incredibly good benefits and salaries for their families. And so how are we able to transition to kind of cleaner technology, to cleaner terminals, while also working and training and making sure that the dock workers have what they need to be able to survive with their families? I think is a balance. I think we've tried to achieve that balance at this terminal. I think the future, as we move forward, we're going to continue to look at how we make terminals more sustainable while also keeping these kind of good union longshore jobs in our docks. If you look, for example, at just next door to Long Beach, San Pedro and downtown Long Beach, I mean, a big part of folks that the working class folks there, they're working on the docks. It's a long time. It's been, I think, a really, really great opportunity to kind of have this conversation around kind of what the future of robots and technology looks like as it relates to climate, but also kind of doubling down on like these good jobs. So I think it's been great.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. That's so wonderful. And I lied to you as we transition into your kind of personal story and how you got into public service. I do want to mention one other thing that you've been working on, which I'm just so inspired by, which is Long Beach was chosen as one of the California sites where migrant children came, and your convention center became a temporary emergency shelter for 1,500-ish migrant kids, right? And you were able to announce, I think even earlier than you were supposed to, that every single one of those children had been reunited with a family or with whoever they were going to be sponsored by. I know that we'll talk about it, but as an immigrant yourself, I'm wondering, first, thank you as just an American for doing that. And secondly, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was just really, I think, an honor to be able to host these kids and these amazing children in our convention center. We had heard, obviously, that the White House and HHS was looking for these kind of emergency sites across the country. I connected with a few folks at the White House, and we were asked if we would be willing to step up and do this and to be a host. And of course, immediately I said, absolutely. I'm an immigrant myself, and I'm grateful that there were folks that welcomed me when I arrived to the United States and were very gracious. And so it was, it was a very challenging, but very, I think, successful effort. We reunited over 1,500 of these kids that have just gone through incredible trauma and a very difficult time in not having the family support system at the border that they need. And many of them, of course, come with unique challenges, mental health challenges, health needs. But we got kids here. When UCLA came in, they built a hospital inside the convention center. They had books, they had outdoor play space for them. And everyone that came into the facility was impressed. I think we actually, we were told by Secretary Becerra and others that we probably had the best facility in the entire country as it relates to taking care of the kids and just the warmness of it. We try to really warm up the convention center. We got books and toys, and we had a book drive and toy drive that brought in over 100,000, believe it or not, books and toys, 100,000 books and toys for these kids. So it was an honor to do it, and we would do it again. I mean, it's just I think the kind of city that Long Beach is.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful story. So you mentioned you're an immigrant. You came here at 5 with your family from Lima, Peru. Tell me about what drove your family to decide to come to America.
Well, I mean, I think like most families that come to the U.S., it's all about the American dream and, kind of wanting the best for your family and your kids. And that's why my mom and dad came to the U.S. with my grandparents, and I had some aunts and uncles. And so, we got here and grew up in a very typical immigrant experience, all together in, the same house, same apartment. Didn't have a lot growing up, but a lot of love and support. And I think that I'm just very grateful that I had really strong family structure. No one in my family had ever gone to college before. So for me, the decision to go to college was a family decision and one that I made having spent a lot of summers in Long Beach with my family at the beach. The university is just blocks away from the beach, Long Beach State. And so it was a campus we knew, and they literally applied to one place, and that was Long Beach State. Didn't know anything else about college. We went there and had an amazing time. And actually my senior year of college is when I actually became a U.S. citizen. So my family and I became U.S. citizens. And it's just funny how things change. I think about what allowed us to become citizens. That was an amnesty bill that Congress passed by a Republican president, by the way, Ronald Reagan, and Democrats. And one of my funny stories is always like when my family and I all became citizens, we were all Republicans. And we were Republicans because we loved Ronald Reagan, because all we knew really was that here is this president that gave us all a path to citizenship. And of course, now we're all Democrats, but you kind of find kind of who you are over time. But we goes to show you how different of a political environment we're in today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and I hear you, my husband's a naturalized citizen as well. And so I got to the privilege of doing his naturalization ceremony with him. And it was, this was when Obama was president, and it was just such a moving experience to see these, so many people who had waited so long to become citizens, who were so, excited to be part of this country and, share these values. And it makes me so sad. And, just where we are kind of with the immigration debate generally. But the same year that you became a citizen, you also became student body president, right? Is that not true in your senior year?
I think I got elected student body president, and then I became a citizen soon after that. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so. Why did you decide to run for student body president?
Honestly, I think I was president of a campus club, or and it got involved that way. And then, you kind of realize, okay, this leadership stuff maybe is good, and so I ran for president, and I won, and that really opened my eyes to the politics. I just kind of it took me a while to kind of figure out what I wanted to do politically, just because I had always wanted intention to be like an educator, and I wanted to be like a college administrator. And I did that. I mean, from a career perspective, I did spend about 10 years in and out of the classroom and working on colleges and university campuses before I became here. Yeah, I've always, I have a doctorate in education. I consider myself like an educator first. I'm married to an educator and a professor here at the university. So we have a kind of a teacher household.
I've talked about my husband a lot today. I don't normally do it. My husband's also a professor. I'm feeling we have a lot of synergies here. Immigrant professors. So tell me about that leap that you made to decide to run for office. Where did that, you'd have a career that you were clearly loving and passionate about. What catalyst was there to say, I'm going to do this?
I was probably a few years into buying my home. I was quickly, was involved in the neighborhood organization. You really quickly realize, okay, I need to get my streets fixed, my sidewalks messed up, all these things. So you get involved that way at the city. And then, my council person got elected to the state legislature, and there was an opening on the city council. And then my neighbors were like, you should run for the city council seat. And I was interested, but, her husband or partner was going to run for her seat, and he had been the former council person. So they kind of, went back and forth. So it was kind of like a situation where everyone said, oh, well, there's no way you're going to win. Obviously, she's the state assembly member for Long Beach and he's the former councilman. So, but I just kind of felt the gusto to do it. And I said, well, I'll try my best. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So I did end up winning. And then the irony of all it was I won. At the time, I was the youngest member ever elected to the Long Beach City Council, which was great. And then a few years later, the mayor decides not to run for re-election. And I'm in a similar position where that state legislator runs for mayor. She's like, I'm running for mayor. And I had already beaten her partner. And she's great, by the way. So we're like super good friends now. And then I said, well, I'm running for mayor. And everybody gave me the same line, which was, well, you're too young. There's never been a person of color elected to citywide office. Certainly not a kind of one-term council person from a part of the city that had not elected a mayor before. And all the mayors came from the same part of town, period. And I came from downtown, from the downtown, a little neighborhood right outside of downtown, which is a working class, neighborhood. And so I ran and I got elected. I think what I was 36 years old I think maybe. So I was at the time, the youngest person elected, the first Latino, or first person of color, first gay person. So I kind of like broke a lot of like glass ceilings really quick. But that helped me, I think, like be bold and like do some. I think people were expecting me to be different than everybody else because I was naturally. So I just moved quick. Progressive taxes, climate change. Immediately was first mayor to appoint more women than men to, the over 350 positions I appoint across the city, boards and commissions and all these, directors for all these city agencies. And that was intentional, you try to make, and I remember when I did that, I remember I was talking a lot about, oh yes, we just made history. We have officially more women than men in the first time ever. A lot of people said, well, why, was that intentional? Why it wasn't intentional? I said, of course it was intentional. You have to, if you're going to actually make that kind of change, you actually have to be intentional about it. It isn't naturally. I found, I think for a lot of folks that say it's, too hard to recruit women, or I think we have to understand that for women, it is oftentimes a lot more difficult to get engaged in a city commission or a volunteer position or even a management role that traditionally has not been welcoming spaces for women. And so you have to do the extra effort. So it was much harder to bring in women because they had so many barriers in front of them. And so I was really proud of that. And then we did a bunch of progressive stuff. We got through trans-inclusive healthcare in our benefits for our employees. We did a bunch of LGBTQ plus support of working people. And we put in place the state's first citywide project labor agreement, which got modeled, after a bunch of, city after city after we did. We were one of the first cities to, for example, ban styrofoam and plastic bags before the state. We raised our minimum wage to $15 before the state of California did. So all those big kind of efforts the state did, we were usually a year or two prior to that and kind of helped pave the way. And, Long Beach used to be a city a decade ago, where a lot of conservatives were elected, and that was just we always Republican Congress members and pretty split councils, and I think that is absolutely is different now. So I'm proud to be our city's most progressive mayor we've ever had, and I'm sure there will be others in the after me that'll be more progressive. But being a mayor, first and foremost, is to balance, I think, the services that you provide, and you can't. I think oftentimes I tell my friends that are in the legislature, you're able to be a little more ideological sometimes and take positions in certain ways. I think as mayors, at the end of the day, people want their streets fixed and the trash picked up and someone to be there when you call 911. That's what they want from you more than anything else. And I think that's what we're trying to focus on.
Yeah, well, it's so amazing. And you've done such a, as you said, just so many changes, so many innovations, but, you got reelected by a lot, and so which seems to mean that people like the direction you went, and, hopefully that's why they voted for you in the first place. And although it was a much closer election the first time, if I remember correctly, than it was the second time.
So first time was close.
Yeah. So you want them over. And I guess I'd end with this question. So, you obviously have done a great job in Long Beach, and you are You've really been touted already as a national rising star in politics too. You were one of the 17 rising stars, as they called them, around the country that got to do one of the keynotes at the Democratic National Convention, for example, with a couple other New Deal leaders. So what do you think's next for you?
That's a decision I'm definitely going to make here in the next couple months. So my hope is to have a decision in place prior to the holiday season. And certainly I'm going to definitely weigh if I'm going to run for re-election one more time. And
because you had that bill.
Voters passed it. So I might do that. I want to really be at a better place with the pandemic before I make any sort of announcement or decision. So I think a campaign right now, or a campaign in the last few months would have been very distracting. So I think we're going to be in a better place, I hope, in a few months, and I think that'll be a good time to kind of make a decision and then go right into it. And if I choose to run for mayor again, I'm gonna run to win. But we'll see what happens then.
That's great. Well, I so appreciate you joining us. And I just want to tell you, I'm so grateful to you and to all your colleagues who are, on the front lines in cities and states across America who are governing and leading in these unprecedented times. And, we just really are grateful for your service and getting us through all of this. So thank you. And thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Thanks for listening to An Honorable Profession. Please subscribe to hear more amazing leaders and keep asking your elected officials to be honorable. Boots Road Group produces podcast. I'm Ryan Coonerty, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars were used in the making of this podcast.